Hi, I'm Schadt, CEO of DoubleHorn. Today I'm joined by Chris Turnley. Hi Chris, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive into entrepreneurship and advisory and some other topics, why don't you give our audience a little bit of background about yourself and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So for my day job, I'm the Vice President of Retail at University Federal Credit Union. Okay. Oversee all the growth and branches for the credit union based here in Austin, Texas. Additionally, I get the opportunity to advise many of the startup companies, been real active in running a consultancy down here where we build and advise companies on their growth strategies, ranging from really small companies to those who are getting ready to go public.
Yeah. So let's start there on the advisory front. How does one get approached, or is it something that you sought after? Because I know that I get asked this a lot, and I think it's an interesting topic, advisory, board of directors. What puts you in that spot?
So a couple things. I think when you think about advisories, the companies that you advise for vary. And there's companies from very small that need advisors to the largest companies in the world have board of directors. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is knowing what you're going to be good at and then putting yourself in that position. Someone challenged me a couple years ago to think about what do I want to be doing in 20 years and to begin thinking about starting doing those things now. Yeah. And so I began to put myself in availability where I started speaking at incubators or at accelerators and starting to put myself in front of the companies I thought I could help the most. Right. And then looking for those companies that not only piqued my interest, but the founder or the founding team kind of shared my values. Right. And then where I thought I could bring value to there. So one of the things I want to be really careful of is that I'm not just jumping at opportunities, or they're not just jumping at me, but we actually are there. We both understand what the role of me being on that advisory role.
So expand on that a little bit. So walk us through the day in the life of an advisor,
Sure.
maybe in one of your current, pick one.
Sure. So one of the interesting ones is Chipper, where we are going after the student loan debt, and it's a huge mountain to climb.
A big market though as well.
It really is. And so you can get after this where a lot of founders come into a small company. So this is a small company example where they have a huge vision, right? They want to take over the world. They know it's a $1.7 trillion problem. And so I always think, like, when you start a company, you have to think really big about your total addressable market, but you have to learn to act really small and find a niche that you can then go own as a young startup, because that's how you're going to better get penetration. You're going to also get success. And then thirdly, you're also going to be able to make more money in the niche, right? So you can find that because you'll provide more value. Yeah. So as an advisor, I want to come in and add, what I really talk about is I add operational excellence to that. And we can talk about, it's great to have great vision. How do you turn that great vision into an executable strategy that you can then build a team around? Yep. And then we look hard at the product strategy as well.
So when you talk about operational excellence, give a few examples of that.
Sure. So a lot of times people didn't ever get into it. No one came into business to be able to run good spreadsheets and to make sure their financials are in place or to make sure they've got a good rhythm for product management tools.
That's not why you started a company.
That's not necessarily the passion they had to start the company.
Right.
But nothing will get done without those things, because it'll keep tripping people up, and you won't attract the best team if you don't have an infrastructure to plug them into. So vision will get them in the door, but it won't keep them in the door. They want to know that they're in a place that they can be supported.
How do you contribute if you're in an advisory role, and let's say that the vision's in place, but the strategy might be a little off? I mean, do you find that to be awkward, or do you just take a very proactive? Because entrepreneurs, I mean, they got the passion. They started it. They love it. They live and die by it. So if you see a strategic, maybe out of bounds along with the vision, how do you approach that with the entrepreneur?
I think you have to always talk about alignment. And it's not that you're not going to get to certain things. That's their fear. It's like the fear of missing out. The FOMO for an entrepreneur is huge.
They live paranoia. They live by it.
Right. And so they're like, well, what if? And I'm like, listen, let's make sure we're aligned. And this elephant still has to get eaten one bite at a time. And if you skip steps, you're going to feel it later, right? And so you have to get them in the mindset between building a great solution to building a great company. And realizing that those are not the same skill sets. So one of the things I always recommend is that they have some sort of COO, it doesn't have to even be that title, but someone is in charge of operations. And sometimes an advisor, we can fill that gap for a while, but until they can fill that gap with an actual role. Right. And so we talk a lot about when we see things out of alignment. I'm like, hey, I see you going to the left. That doesn't appear to align with what we've agreed upon. Yeah. And then I think in between board meetings, just teaching them that it's okay to have accountability in the strategy and accountability in the markers, and say, by the next board meeting, we hope to have this. this, and this done. And if you're not going to hit those three things, you need to begin to communicate more regularly wins and losses and progress and changes. And just getting them to learn that accountability will actually help them go forward. It will not restrict their actual growth and progress.
It can't hurt.
Right, but it can feel like that at the beginning.
Yeah.
When it's your idea, everything's yours, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're losing control, but you're actually gaining progress.
Yeah. Before we move on to kind of a couple other questions that I have that are real key, about funding.
Yeah.
So I just asked you one about strategy. How do you approach a delicate situation? Again, with the people that have the passion, they started this, right?
Yes.
How do you prep them, or what's words of wisdom when they're going down the funding route?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is trying to figure out with a founder or even a founding team, or even sometimes you get a team of, when I spend some time with larger companies, even that are in the $20, $30 million range, that they truly understand the difference between their burn rate, what the amount of revenue coming in, and what the cash coming in is, and really understanding, like, do they have a good handle on how that's going? So, because a lot of companies, where they get into places, they want to grow faster, so they overinvest in growth.
Yes.
And being a growth guy, that's hard to imagine, but what happens is you're overinvesting faster than the cash is going to come in, and you actually put the whole business at risk. Instead of saying, like, we're going to go sell to these 10 markets. No, you're going to go sell to one, then you're going to sell to two, and you're going to find where the momentum is and go. So that's one way you have to think about revenue. How they think about fundraising is kind of the same way. Like, you do not spend the money until you have it in hand, because you're putting the whole business at risk.
That's a novel concept.
Yeah, that's the first one, but it just gets, you want it so bad. Someone says, I'm going to write you a $100,000 check, and they're like, great, we got it. I'm like, no, you don't have it until it's in the bank.
Yes.
And so you can begin to have plans for what you would do with it, but you actually can't action on it until it's there. And then you have to build. A lot of founders want the money without the communication. And I think one of the number one lacking things I see is constant communication, where the ones who do it really well have incredible board communication and incredible investor communication and potential investor communication, where every week or every 2 weeks they are giving an update. Here's what happened. Here's what didn't happen. Here's what we're learning. Here's what we saw. And even if there's nothing ton to report, just that steady flow builds so much credibility out there.
Yeah.
We put a lot of focus on the 1 minute pitch for startups. I wish we put more focus on continual communication. Because I think over the long haul, that actually, you may grab their attention in a 15-second pitch, but you're going to grab their money by continually building trust.
Yeah. We were talking earlier, but before this session started, and you brought up some really good points about the profile, or maybe some experiences that would really benefit folks before they jump in to just starting up a company. But we can expand on that a little bit.
I think so. When you're on this side and you get more gray than you do black, or gray than brown on my side, then you start to realize a lot of the success I have is because I had incredible mentors and teachers, and I had, my time at Iron Mountain was so much around people coaching me on how to do things and learning certain things, that it really equipped me to be able to jump into the startup world and to jump into an advisory world. I think so often people come in and they have big vision, and we tell them that's enough, when it really, I'm not sure how equipped they are to be successful. So I think a lot of even learning, like, what their strengths are, what their strengths aren't, because that's incredibly liberating, and that it's okay to not be good at everything. But a lot of them, they don't have basic business skills. And that will come back to bite you in the butt, no matter how great your vision is, because it's not, the ideas come, everyone's got great ideas. I think if you sat anyone down and thought about, everyone would have one great idea at least, some have 20. But it's the execution at the end of the day that wins, and it's that relentless pursuit to execution. And I'm just not sure that we are attacking that from an entrepreneur standpoint versus just setting them up to go fail.
Which is the reason you have advisors.
That is why we have advisors.
Yeah. Talk about the phenomenon of how you see the folks that are coming out of larger companies. We talked about this as well, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I think there's an amazing trend, and it's somewhat keeps me up at night. Like, if this is one that keeps me up at night, because I'm in this generation, and a lot of my friends and a lot of people I grew up in business school and kind of grew up career-wise with, that are peaking out in their 40s because they've worked for a company or they've worked for a couple larger companies, and they weren't necessarily continuing to grow a skill set that blends into this gig economy. And I think they feel like they're being sidelined, and I think there's part of that they have to own. You got to continue to own to keep yourself, and advisories can be a great bridge to that. You start getting in touch with some smaller companies, you add your expertise, you start to kind of learn what's going on in the market, different technologies. Because I think what's happening is we're going to then push people to the side that have a ton to still contribute. Or people are going to move to individual contributor roles where really they have strong leadership gifts.
Yeah.
And because they don't necessarily fit, one of the things we did at Samplicate when we first started was begin to match those people and giving them a kind of a trial run.
Explain Samplicate. I
Sure.
think it's a great business model.
So we had a growth consultancy, but it really was based on the fact that we took people again and how do you scale growth? That was the number one question we came in to ask. And how do you scale the company for growth? And how do you scale your marketing for growth? And when we looked at it, one of the biggest assets we have was all of these men and women that had been doing this for 20, 30 years in their companies, but they didn't have a bridge and a way to go enter into the startup market. And they wanted to in their head, most of which actually didn't. They just thought it sounded romantic, but when they got in, their idea of what a startup was.
But it's scary if you're on their side, right?
It is. It's almost like
it's a daunting task.
It's almost like trying to jump in and think about, you worked in a large organization with an established CEO, and now you're going to go work for someone who's 10, 15 years younger than you because they're a visionary and they don't actually know their job near as well as you know your job.
Yeah.
And I think that's the number one thing I coach VP of sales on, or those who are making that career transition, is you have to also be a coach to that CEO because you're going to know your role and they're learning theirs. But you have to be okay with that. And it can be humbling, but I've watched when it hits, it's an incredible match. And then it also gives people confidence going forward.
Well, and it also goes back to what you were saying about the startup entrepreneur being aware of what they're not good at.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes both.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
And both in being an advisor, I think that's one of the things when I look, I've met a bunch of incredible founders that we've chosen not to go advise or consult or work with because they really they weren't ready for that kind of coaching, and it really wasn't going to be a good value use of anybody's
That's one of the
time.
questions I was about to ask you as well. Took the words out of my mouth, but obviously you're not going to provide names. That would be professional, but what is it when you see that and you go, I'm not going to touch that. I don't want to advise that. Is it somebody that just lacks that awareness, lacks the ability to communicate?
Yes, or they're not there yet, right? Yeah. They want to grow, but they actually shouldn't be growing, right? No. So there's a time when you have to really, I tell people, you should work on the product at least twice as much as you think you should before it's ready to go. And good product just eats everything for breakfast.
Yeah.
And so Andreessen Horowitz spent a lot of time on this, like first product, then team, right? And really just continue to hone in on your product. Ask more questions, make sure you have a good fit, make sure you have a good niche. And there's some companies that way, and then some it's just personality, right? They want certain people to tell them certain things, and then sometimes it's skill set, right? There are times where I'm like, listen, I'm not. They may have the same skill set I have, right? And I'm like, really, what you need in an advisor is you need this, this, and this. Yeah. And so, I think also coaching an entrepreneur on what they need for an advisory board based on who they are is also something we miss. Sometimes they just meet somebody who's got gray hair, some money, has been successful in a couple things. Like, you should be on my board, and I'm like, you don't want me on your board. I would, you would hate me.
It's not just because you have the wisdom doesn't mean it's the right type
doesn't mean
of
it's
wisdom.
the right for right.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the if you go back to Chipper?
Yeah.
So when you saw that opportunity, gigantic market, you said, okay, this is a huge market, great business model. But then you have somebody like a SoFi out there, right, which has been hugely successful.
Yeah.
And they were, wouldn't you agree, kind of one of the pioneers of rolling up the debt and bringing it to the new age. And that market.
Yeah.
Do you look at a model that's out there and then say back to the entrepreneur, the owner, the founder, and say, be aware of these folks. Be very, very careful.
A little bit, actually. We were blessed. So I met Tony, who started Chipper. I met him when we were founding Dosh. Actually, that's when he came across. We were about a year and a half into the Dosh, which is another cashback company we started here. And so he was thinking about this idea. And we looked at things like SoFi and the impact they were having. SoFi was making it really good for people who already were going to get refinanced. So we looked at the rest of the market and said, what could we do differently? And so we started to think about how could you make principal payments easier? And so what I liked is he was really adaptable to the ideas as we started to kind of push through what it could potentially be. Because I think that's what people don't realize is as an entrepreneur, you have to fall in love with solving your customer's problem. Whoever your target market is, you got to fall in love with that because you're going to pivot the idea. You've been doing this for a while, so you pivot the idea and you're like, I didn't really know this is what we'd be doing to solve that problem.
It's very rare not to have a pivot.
Yeah.
Very rare.
And so I think I want to always challenge that early in our relationship, even before I come on, is like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And see, are they even open to that if that comes to that pivot, or have they fallen in love with their solution? Yeah. And I think that probably comes down to what causes a successful versus unsuccessful. Successful falls in love with solving the problem. Unsuccessful falls in love with the solution that they've created, and they want to convince you that you just don't get it.
Yeah, and and on the note of the entrepreneur, I think there's nothing more impressive when you see an entrepreneur or a founder take another role.
Yes.
Take the back seat, don't you?
I do.
I mean, I think that is so impressive when you see somebody say, okay, I'll go be VP of product, or I'll be VP of sales, and they just let people go ahead of them. And usually those companies are very successful.
Very successful. We had one locally here. I think one of the ones I've watched walk it out as gracefully as possible is WP Engine. Their founder, incredibly brilliant guy, Jason Cohen, who I respect
Phenomenal
deeply.
outcome. Look at that outcome.
Phenomenal outcome. But he actually led the recruitment for Heather Brunner as the CEO, because he's like, I didn't have vision for it to be, this isn't my skill set. He stayed on, and not just in a corner, but he stayed on in a vital executive role, and still continues to that today. It was really one of the more best honoring cultures and graceful ways I've done it, where you saw two highly capable people really make that work.
Yeah, phenomenal leadership, and that's where I wanted to go next from a leadership question for you.
Yeah.
So you're board of advisors. How do you coach the leadership, or is that something you believe it's in somebody or it's not?
No.
Can you coach these founders, these entrepreneurs with the leadership?
Yeah, I think you can. I'm a leadership junkie.
Yeah.
So the reason I think I'm able to do a lot of the things that I do is that I kind of do the same thing in every room I'm in, right? I love going to leadership principles, growth principles, and seeing like how do those align. So I think you can coach anyone to be better. I tell my kids sometimes like coaching will make you faster, it won't make you fast, right? So coaching can make you a better leader, it may not make you a good leader.
I think it's a great analogy.
So I think everybody can get better, and you shouldn't let your limitations be an excuse to not get better.
Right. Well, as we kind of wind down here, let's talk about you. I mean, you're vice president of a financial institution, advisory member across multiple companies. How do you manage your time?
Yeah.
What words of wisdom can you provide the audience?
I think for me, the best thing that I was taught is to find out what you're good at and spend as much time as you can doing that. Jim Collins has this thing, he talks about being best in the world. It doesn't mean you're the best in the world at it. It means in this world, what are you the best at? And I caught onto that 15 years ago or so, whenever I first read the book. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out how I spend the most amount of my time doing what I'm good at, which is helping people align. I can't fix anything. Like if you asked if something broke in your office, I'd be like, you should call somebody. I'm good.
Call a handyman.
I'm good with the phone. I don't fix anything. I don't know how to wire anything. I don't know how to build anything. So I'm kind of blessed that way, that I kind of like have one skill set and it applies in a lot of places. But I think that's being and I've had a good support system to let me be confident in that. So too many times I think people feel like they have to know how to do something, or it's really freeing to just say that's not it, and I can spend most of my time doing that.
Well, good stuff. Well, we appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That's a fascinating journey. You're making a positive impact on a lot of companies, and we wish you the best of luck. And thanks for coming today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.